I just want to say this, I want to be clear. So we're on this planet, the third dimension, which is a launch pad to all the other dimensions below and above. These wizards are taking drugs in these temples and interfacing with these palantirs, these crystal balls, which aren't really crystal balls. It's their psychic focus of an interdimensional connection while they're on drugs, looking into glass, to then be able to see the future and understand what's happening, to give them temporal power over this planet.
Explain that.
So we begin our story in the Halo stars. Imagine this, if you would. You're born onto a world where the very star that has blessed you with life is now cursing you with super cancer. You and everyone you know are most likely not going to make it to your dirty 30s, and hell, you might not even make it to your terrible teens on this hellscape. So, naturally, you and all your homies make this death cult in hopes that if you worship death enough, you won't die. It's genius, don't think about it. And just like every other species in the Only Wars universe, there's a bunch of factions all warring for power. These factions are called dynasties, and they're metal as fuck. While there are many dynasties, these are the notable ones. The Minarch dynasty, the Mephrit dynasty, the Novak dynasty, the Nilak dynasty, the Saltek dynasty, and the Zarican dynasty. For the purposes of this story, you're part of the Nilak dynasty for, reasons. So, one day, you and the boys are just cruising through the galaxy and you find this species of space slugs that could, with a snap of a finger, cure you and your entire species. And not just that, but you pull up on them while they're in the middle of creating life. So you shoot them a text and you're like, yo my guys, you mind helping us out? Our species is living an absolutely terrible existence. I mean, we're actually worshipping death in hopes to not die. We will do anything, please just help us. And the space slugs look over at them and they're like, we see your point, counterpoint, deuces. And they just teleport away using the not warp subway system. Now, the Necrontyr, who that's you in this story, are a little perturbed by this whole interaction. Understandably, in my humble opinion. So, naturally, when you go tell the wider Necrontyr society about all of this, they're like, fuck our star, fuck their creations, and most importantly, fuck those slugs. This leads to a small event known as the War in Heaven, where a mostly peaceful war rages across the whole galaxy for a short 60 million years. Okay, technically the Necrontyr referred to it as the War of Aeons, but let's be honest here, War in Heaven sounds metal as fuck. Now, you and your people go into this thing enthusiastically, right? Universe has dealt you a shitty hand, you're a member of a death cult, you and everyone you know is gonna die well before their time, you're all pissed, and this is your chance to fight back. So, after a few early victories, the enthusiasm quickly dies when the slugs that can shit out life start shitting out life meant specifically to kill you. It then becomes a very rough couple millennia for the Necrontyr, and eventually the space slugs do one of the most disrespectful things by essentially placing you, well, I guess by this point you'd be long dead. So the rest of the Necrontyr unwillingly went into timeout, right? Their once mighty empire shrunken back down to the very world they spawned in. During this short millennia-long exile, they developed a completely healthy level of hatred for all sentient life. Downside in all this, their war boner for the old ones and all of their children was now fully gone. Upside to all this, they got a new war boner for some civil wars, and so that goes on for a little bit. It was around that time that some dickhead named the Silent King found himself these Cthulhu-esque things called star gods. And he decides he's going to make a deal with these things, believing they will be the weapon that can finally give the Necrontyr victory over the old ones. Considering their history with stars, that's a bold move, Cotton, so let's see how this one plays out. So here's the plan. We're going to build suits made out of living metal, don't ask, to house our star-devouring. Did I mention these things can eat stars? Completely forgot. These things can eat stars. So anyways, we're going to build living suits of metal for the star-eating gods. Step 2, we're going to send suited up star-eating gods against the old ones and all of their children. And step 3, profit. This plan is foolproof. Scout's honor. Unsurprisingly, the old ones, the proto-orcs, and the baby space elves had absolutely no answer to the star gods wearing Iron Man suits. Big surprise, I know. Now, Unleashing the power of beings that literally eat stars can have some effects. One of those effects was waking up Not Hell from a nap. Not Hell then spews out a bunch of cuddly creatures called enslavers who quickly get to work eradicating all sentient life in a mostly peaceful fashion, of course. Also, if I remember correctly, this is around the time our boy Trajan starts up his collection and begins ramping up his beef with Orkin. Shameless plug here if you're interested. Also, that's around the time the Eldar start really gaining their psychic potency, as well as the orcs becoming the lovable warmongers we all know and love today. Granted, that does jack and shit for them, as the Necrontyr are fully beating that ass 12 ways to Sunday. And it was around that time that the Star Boys came back to the Necrontyr and were like, the flesh is weak, or some shit like that. And if you remember, during their extended timeout, they had grown to hate all life anyway, so the Necrontyr were like, fuck it, we ball. And so one by one, the members of the Necrontyr willingly marched to undergo the process known as Biotransference. And of course, since GW is a massive tease, the exact process the Necrontyr underwent during this time is, you guessed, unknown. What we do know is that their flesh was replaced with the necrodermis, which is what they used to make their Iron Man suits earlier. Also, the vast majority of the Necrontyr weren't just stripped of their flesh, but their very souls too. Hatred and bitterness is what drove the Necrontyr to willingly walk into the biofurnaces, and what emerged from them were not the Necrontyr restored. These were the Necrons. They were filled with only the desire to scour the universe of all life, with only those who possess some modicum of plot relevance maintaining their consciousness. They were here. They were ready to fuck. And fuck they did. So the Satan were now able to strike out against the old ones using their new toys that they had just made. They struck with such force they were even able to break into the subway system, which made the old ones finally lose their war boner as they started to comprehend just how fucked they were. When the Necrons had the old ones held up in their few remaining strongholds, they then turned their sights to the rest of the galaxy. Then, just like what was done to them, they culled the other species of the galaxy until they each only had one world. Then the Necrons, under the command of the Satan, would just sit and spawn camp the worlds, like for the lulz, I guess. And this went on for a time until one of the Satan, known as the Deceiver, decided to come in and get all the other Satan to start boxing one another. For the lulz, I guess. This caused another millennia-long conflict to take place in which the Star Gods began cannibalizing each other, because fuck it, this story isn't wild enough, toss in cannibalism, it's dope. Anyways, the old ones see this and they're like, alright, it's now or never, boys. So they start doing all types of experiments and shit, and they even manage to enhance the psychic potency of the space elves even more. So the last alliance of slugs, elves, and orcs then managed to start turning the tide against the Necron and their Satan overlords. Seeing their food starting to fight back, the Satan put their beef aside and came up with a plan to build these massive pylons. When the pylons are activated, it's like a big fuck all off button for warp shenanigans. Meaning, not so much the orcs, but definitely the space elves would be seriously nerfed, and this would hopefully help the Satan return to ruling the galaxy with an iron fist. Shout out to Kada, y'all live on in our hearts. Anyways, it's at this point in the war that so many bodies have been stacked, and so many worlds have been scoured, then rebuilt, then scoured again, that the warp is like, oh yeah, I'm a thing. Pops back into existence. Even though technically it was never gone, but warp fuckery and shit. Also, the warp waking up kinda shuts down the subway for a bit, and it's around this time the Silent King starts looking at the Satan, then looks at his people, well, his robo people, and then he thinks to himself, yeah, fuck this. So he starts hatching a plan to get his people free of these quote-unquote gods. Problem with that though, he knows they're too strong. But he also knows this war with the old ones has been draining their strength, and while our boy has made some questionable calls in the past, he sees an opportunity. He orders his cryptex to start building cannons powerful enough to shatter the Satan. He knows he can't really kill them because, let's face it, they're gods, no way in fuck you were killing them, except that one time, but we're not going to talk about that. But you can disperse them. Now, we don't have a whole lot of information about the war that then took place between the Necrons and the Satan. What we do know is that the Silent Douche managed to build and fire his hyper fuck-all cannon. That cannon was so powerful it damaged causality itself, no big deal. It also put the fear of God into the star-eating gods, and then they willingly submitted themselves to be dissipated into smaller shards, and then used as batteries for the Necron's big fuck-all super weapons. And after finally defeating his biggest op, and freeing his people from the star-eating Iron Men, the Silent Douche looked around at the galaxy before him. He saw massive warbands of orcs beginning to form all over the place. He saw Eldar quickly rising in power and knew they would be the new dominant force at the end of all this. And then he saw swarms of big fuck-all demons that really fucking hated him and his people on account of kinda needing life to fuel the warp in the first place. And the Necrons were kinda big on their whole purging the galaxy of all life thing. The silent douche saw all these things and he said to himself and his people, yeah, fuck this, we are taking a nap. So he orders his people to build massive tomb complexes absolutely everywhere, and then the Necrons all take the long sleep. Well, what happened to the silent douche, you ask? Great question. He jumped on his ship and just floated out into the void for like a really long fucking time. Like over 60 million years long. Which I guess it was supposed to be some sort of self-imposed punishment for kinda being a dumbass and arguably leaving his people in a worse off state. We're not going to get into it. And that brings us to the modern day of the Only Wars universe. Many of the scattered tomb worlds are waking up and immediately activating the murder.exe file. The silent douche randomly decided to show back up a few years ago, and Trazen is still objectively the best Necron to ever fucking do it. Fight me. And while there are many other notable Necrons I feel I could go into depth with, I've wasted far too much of your time as it is, so this has been the Necrons Poorly Explained. Thank you to anyone who has watched to this point, I greatly appreciate y'all. Thank you to anyone who has subscribed, you guys are dope and it's cool to have this kind of little community starting to form. I am by no means an expert in the lore, but I've loved 40k since I was a kid and it's dope that we can just kind of all come together and bullshit about it. No idea what the next video is going to be because it's like 2 in the morning and my brain hurts. So, y'all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever. Love y'all. Deuces. In another beautiful display of plot fuckery, somehow the super cancer patients have superior technology than the dudes that are able to shit out life from thin air. Explain that to me.